The road to Willow Creek was a lonely stretch of cracked asphalt, swallowed on both sides by an ocean of corn. The sky hung low and bruised with the color of rust, and the air smelled faintly of soil and rot. Ethan Harper hadn't been back since his father's funeral 5 years ago, and as the miles slipped under his tires, the silence pressed tighter against him. The radio had died 2 towns back, and even the crickets seemed to keep their distance from this part of Nebraska. He slowed the truck as the old farmhouse came into view, its outline a ghost against the dying light. The place looked smaller than he remembered. The paint had peeled off in long strips, and the windows were black and hollow, like open eyes that refused to blink. The porch sagged in the middle, the boards warped from decades of neglect, but behind it, rising like a forgotten monument, stood the barn. It loomed over the land, huge, slanted, its once red walls now the color of dried blood. The roofline was crooked, and the wind whistled through its missing shingles with a sound like whispering voices. Heavy chains sealed the doors, rusted and knotted together in a way that made it clear someone had wanted to keep something in, not out. Ethan climbed out of the truck and stood there, listening. The corn shifted faintly in the distance. The world felt hollow, like the air itself was holding its breath. He could still remember his father's warning, spoken one night when a storm had rolled across the plains. Never go near that barn after dark, son. Animals don't go near it. Not even the wind touches it sometimes. His father had leaned close, eyes hard. Sometimes you'll hear it breathe. Back then, Ethan had laughed. His dad had always been a strange man, carrying stories about the land that didn't belong in any sane world. But now, standing there, grown and alone, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the air around him was moving, not with the breeze, but with something deeper, something alive. He spent the evening inside the farmhouse, unpacking a few boxes and lighting a single oil lantern he'd found still hanging in the kitchen. The glass was fogged, and the light shimmered faintly against the walls, revealing faded wallpaper, old photographs, and the thick fingerprints of time. Every step he took made the floor complain under his boots. He tried to distract himself, fixed a loose window hinge, brushed dust from the counter, but the silence kept creeping back, crawling under the sound of his own breath. He'd planned to stay just long enough to decide whether to sell the place or restore it. But as the night deepened, that plan began to feel less certain. At midnight, the lantern flickered. The flame stretched tall, then shrank to a trembling ember. Ethan's breath came out in small clouds, his body telling him it had gotten colder. Though the windows were shut tight, then he heard it. At first, it was faint, almost too subtle to notice. A slow, heavy exhale that seemed to come from outside. The house groaned softly, the sound of old wood flexing. Then came the inhale, a low dragging sound, deep and wet, like air being pulled through lungs that hadn't breathed in years. Ethan stood frozen. He told himself it was the wind, but the trees outside weren't moving. The cornfield stood still, like a painting. He stepped to the porch, the boards creaking beneath him, and peered toward the barn. That's when he heard it again. In, out, in, out. The barn was breathing. Each breath sounded heavier, closer, as though the wooden walls were expanding and contracting. The roof groaned softly with the motion, and a loose door hinge clicked in rhythm with the inhale. Ethan's skin prickled. His heartbeat quickened, pounding in his ears until it drowned out the sound. He stepped off the porch, boots crunching in the dirt. The air felt thick, syrupy, like he was moving through something invisible. The closer he got, the colder it became. The smell changed too, earthy and damp, like soil mixed with old blood. He stopped about 10 feet from the doors. The chains trembled softly. The barn's massive frame gave off a faint vibration, like a giant beast asleep just under the surface. "Hello?" He called out, Though he didn't know why, the breathing stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. It was absolute. No crickets, no wind, no rustling of corn, just stillness. He could almost hear his pulse in his throat. Then something tapped the inside of the barn. Once, twice, 3 times. Slow, deliberate. Ethan stumbled backward and turned for the house. He didn't run, not yet, but he didn't look back either. The moment he stepped through the front door, the air seemed to loosen, and the night outside exhaled again, deep and satisfied. He locked the door behind him, though he knew it wouldn't matter much if something wanted in. The lantern flame flickered violently before steadying. Ethan sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the wood grain, trying to calm the shaking in his hands. He told himself it was just the wind playing tricks, that he was tired from the drive. But when he lay down on the old couch and closed his eyes, he could still hear it. Faint, distant, like the barn was whispering through the fields. The sound followed him into uneasy dreams, twisting them into flashes of red wood, chains rattling, and a heartbeat that wasn't his own. Morning came grey and brittle. Ethan woke to silence again. He walked outside, blinking against the cold light. The corn swayed lazily now, and birds darted through the air. Everything seemed normal, except the chain. The chain around the barn doors gleamed silver in the sunlight, fresh metal, new as and untouched by rust. He frowned. He had seen it last night. It had been old, corroded, heavy with time. Now it looked like someone had replaced it, but there was no one here. The nearest neighbor lived 5 miles down the road, and Ethan hadn't told a soul he was coming. He tried to shake off the unease, went back to fixing the house, but every hammer strike, every nail that hit wood, echoed strangely, as though the barn was answering back. By late afternoon, a cold wind began to blow. He looked up from his work and saw the sky had gone a flat, dead color. The cornfields rippled like waves. In the corner of his eye, something moved. A shadow, tall, human-shaped, sliding along the side of the barn. He dropped the hammer. The sound echoed through the field like a gunshot. He called out, "Hey! Who's there?" No reply. The shadow was gone. He waited, staring for a long moment, the wind tugging at his jacket. The air felt wrong again. Thicker, colder, heavier. He could smell the same faint scent of wet earth. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps. The whisper of corn became murmurs. At one point, half awake, he thought he heard his father's voice. It came from far away, carried by the wind through the window crack. "Ethan, don't go inside." He sat up, heart pounding. His breath fogged in front of him. He turned toward the window and froze. The barn doors were open. The new chain hung broken, glinting faintly in the moonlight. A cold wind poured through the fields, carrying with it a low, steady sound. In, out, in, out. The barn was breathing again, louder this time. Ethan stood motionless, staring through the glass as the shadows inside the barn shifted like something was moving, something waiting. And then, from somewhere deep in the dark, he thought he saw a shape turn toward him. Something tall, hunched, and impossibly still. He didn't move. He couldn't. The world seemed to hold its breath again, and the barn exhaled. The night clung to Ethan like wet cloth as he stepped toward the barn. His flashlight trembled in his grip, throwing thin slices of light that cut through the mist, crawling across the ground. Every breath he took felt heavier, slower, as though the air itself resisted his lungs. The open barn doors waited ahead, tall and black like the mouth of something ancient and starving. He hesitated at the threshold. The wood around the doorway was cold, damp beneath his fingers, and the smell of rot rolled out to meet him. Earth and mildew, and something metallic underneath. Faint but unmistakable. He swallowed hard and lifted the light. The beam vanished into darkness after only a few feet, absorbed by shadows that seemed to move when he wasn't looking. Inside, the barn stretched deeper than he remembered. The rafters vanished into black. Old tools hung from nails in the beams, their metal rusted and red as dried blood. Chains swung lazily, clinking just enough to sound alive. The floor creaked as he stepped inside. It didn't sound like wood. It sounded soft, like stepping on something that gave slightly under his boots. "Dad?" His voice was small, unsteady. It echoed once, then disappeared into the dark. He listened. The silence grew so deep, he could hear the blood moving in his ears. Then the sound began again, a breath, slow, thick, coming from all directions. He froze. The sound filled the space, the inhale dragging for seconds, the exhale rattling through the walls. The entire structure seemed to pulse, boards stretching and shrinking like ribs. Dust fell in thin streams from the ceiling. Ethan turned the light downward, and the breath hitched in his throat. The ground wasn't dirt anymore. It was black, wet, and faintly shining. It shifted in rhythm with the sound, expanding when the barn inhaled, sinking when it exhaled. He crouched and touched it before he could stop himself. It was warm. A whisper came from behind him. "You came back to feed us." He spun around. The flashlight's beam swept across the barn, catching glimpses of movement. A shadow sliding between the posts. The curve of something pale retreating into the dark. "Who's there?" he shouted, though the question sounded useless even to his own ears. The whisper came again, layered this time, dozens of voices overlapping, all saying the same words. "Feed us! Feed us!" The beam of light flickered once, then steadied on a shape near the far wall. It was a man, or what had once been one. His body hung limp, suspended from the ceiling by chains hooked through his shoulders. His head sagged forward, hair matted, but when the light crossed his face, the eyes opened. They were clouded white and staring straight at Ethan. The mouth moved with the rhythm of the barn's breath, inhaling and exhaling in perfect time. Ethan stumbled backward, his foot catching on something buried beneath the soft floor. He fell hard, the flashlight rolling away, its beams spinning crazily. For a heartbeat, he saw the entire barn illuminated, the walls rippling, the chains twitching, the floor undulating like muscle under skin. The man in the corner wasn't alone. There were more of them, half buried in the floor, faces breaking through the black surface, as if rising from tar. Their mouths opened and closed with the same wet, gasping sound. He clawed for the flashlight and scrambled toward the doors, but they slammed shut before he reached them. The noise echoed like thunder, shaking the beams. Chains uncoiled from above, slithering down around him. He felt one wrap around his wrist and yanked tight. Another looped around his ankle. "Let me go," he shouted, pulling, but the chains tightened, dragging him backward. His flashlight blinked out, plunging him into total darkness. The air grew thick with the smell of rot and iron. The voice came again, closer now, almost in his ear. "This land was never yours. It feeds. It always feeds." He struggled, kicking, but the ground itself began to shift beneath him. The warm, pulsing soil split open, revealing what lay beneath. He saw bones, hundreds of them, tangled with thick, root-like veins that pulsed with dull red light. Faces formed between them, the features stretching from the earth itself. He recognized some of them. His father's was among them. Ethan screamed. The faces opened their mouths, and the barn inhaled again, deep and rattling. The air rushed past him, pulling his hair, his clothes, everything toward the center of the floor. The breathing grew faster, desperate, hungry. Something grabbed his leg, cold fingers, wet and strong. He kicked free and crawled toward the door. The chains struck the ground beside him like living snakes. A whisper followed him, low and angry. "Don't leave! You belong to the soil now." He reached the door and threw his shoulder against it. It didn't budge. Then, as suddenly as it had closed, it flew open, throwing him backward into the field. He hit the dirt hard and lay there, gasping. The night air felt thin, wrong. The barn loomed before him, its open doorway pulsing faintly with each breath. He pushed himself to his feet and ran. Across the yard, past the house, toward his truck. He didn't look back until he was already halfway down the road. The barn was still breathing. He didn't remember starting the engine, didn't remember the drive. He only remembered the silence afterward. The road stretching endlessly in front of him. The corn on both sides, swaying as if whispering secrets to the wind. He drove until the sun began to rise. When the first light broke over the fields, he finally pulled over, shaking, heart hammering. The world looked normal again. He told himself he was safe. He told himself it hadn't been real. Then something shifted behind him. In the rearview mirror, he saw the tarp covering his bags twitch. Just a small movement, but enough to freeze him in place. Slowly, he turned in his seat. The tarp lifted an inch, then settled again. He reached back with a trembling hand and peeled it up. Underneath was a small pile of black soil, dark as ink. It wasn't dirt from the road. It was damp and warm. As he watched, it moved slightly. A slow, steady rise and fall, like breathing. He stared at it, unable to move. Then a whisper came, soft and intimate, right next to his ear, though no one was there. "You took us with you." The sound was gentle, almost tender, but it hollowed him out from the inside. His breath hitched, and he threw open the door, stumbling into the road. He looked back into the truck, expecting the pile to be gone. It wasn't. It had grown. The soil spread across the seat, tendrils curling over the leather, veins forming beneath its surface. He could see faint outlines of fingers pressing from within. Something was trying to climb out. Ethan backed away, shaking his head, muttering, "No, no." His voice broke. The whisper came again, but now it was many voices, layered and hungry. "Feed us." He ran. He didn't know where. The horizon stretched forever. Cornfields in every direction. The wind following him with the rhythm of a breath that wasn't his. Behind him, the truck's engine roared to life. The headlights flickered once, twice, then steadied, casting long beams across the field. And as Ethan turned for one last look, he saw the soil covering the inside of the windshield, pressing outward in slow, heavy waves. The truck began to sink. The ground beneath it cracked, then opened, swallowing it whole. The road sealed itself behind the wreck, leaving no trace but a faint smell of wet earth. Weeks later, when a new buyer came to look at the Harper farm, the place was quiet again. The barn stood tall and still, doors shut, the chains dull with rust. The sheriff told him it was a fine piece of land, good soil, easy to work. The man smiled and said he'd start planting in the spring. That night, as the wind picked up across the cornfields, the sheriff driving home thought he heard something faint behind him. A slow, steady breath, rising and falling in the dark. And somewhere, out in those acres of quiet land, the barn exhaled again. The soil was feeding.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.